Just relax for a few minutes and close your eyes and be here now. Welcome to you adventurers and explorers of the big question of life, the big questions of life. For a few moments, let's lift ourselves up and out of the numbers, ratios, graphs, and unspeakable suffering. We will engage the philosophical, intellectual, and spiritual aspects of ourselves, and perhaps buoy ourselves to deal with some of the realities around us. Thank you to Susie Cole, President of the Interfaith Council of Rossmore, Wilma Garvey, the host of Zoom, and the Executive Director of the Contra Costa County Interfaith Council. The Big Questions Committee, Ruth Ahern, Gloria Sunshine, and Channing Miller, and of course, our speaker, Dr. Kate Boisvert, whom I will introduce soon. Many words have been used to describe the times our planet is in now. Tumultuous, disordered, confused, apocalyptic, chaotic. The word I want to focus on is chaotic. I found an interesting metaphor in the word chaos within the scientific realm, which could give us hope for what we are going through. In Margaret Wheatley's foundational book, Leadership in the New Sciences, used as a textbook in universities, she explains how chaos and order dance together in the creation of a more advanced system. She says, we have learned that growth always requires passage through the fearful realms of disintegration. It is chaos's great destructive energy that dissolves the past and gives us the gift of a new future. The destruction created by chaos is necessary for the creation of anything new. She goes on to share one of the many great myths that arose thousands of years ago to explain the creation of the world. This is one of them. At the beginning was chaos, the endless yawning chasm devoid of form or fullness. And there was also Gaia, mother of the earth, she who brought forth form and stability. In Greek story, chaos and Gaia were partners, two primordial powers engaged in a duet of opposition and dissonance, creating everything we know. In the last 30 or so years, there has been a new understanding of change and disorder, which have emerged from chaos theory. That change is only possible with the partnering of two great forces of chaos and order, as in the myth of chaos and Gaia. With computers, scientists are able to see how chaos partners with order and disorder, which have emerged from chaos theory. That change is only possible with the partnering of these two great forces. With computers, scientists are able to see how chaos partners with order. The computer can record the evolution of a chemical system as it goes into chaos when confronted with changes in its environment. And then this system self-organizes into a regenerated and higher level within the system. In our own lives, some of us have experienced the chaos and desolation of descending into the dark night of the soul, where everything around us and in us seems to be in disorder. It is frightening and so dark we see no way out. However, when we come through our soul's dark energy, dark night, we experience the strength, the clarity, and the regenerated energy created through this personal chaos. We know we have emerged changed and stronger with new insights. Perhaps we have been able to survive the soul's dark night because there is in our nature an energy and a pattern which upholds us in the dark night. The British physicist David Bohm, whom Einstein called his spiritual son, found in his work with quantum physics that at a level we can't discern, there is an unbroken wholeness. Knowing that in the natural world, in the world of science, chaos is a part of the pattern, might give us hope of regeneration out of the present chaos into a higher order of being. So let's take our cues for hope for the future from the science of chaos theory and look for the ways in which we ourselves, our community, our planet can self-organize to a new, higher, more compassionate and integrated level of being. I would like now to introduce our speaker, Dr. Kate Boisvert, an astronomer who has focused on the relationship between science and religion throughout her 40-year career teaching astronomy and interdisciplinary cosmology. During her graduate study at UC Berkeley, she began a lifelong quest to understand the universe from a spiritual perspective. Drawn to the cosmology and teachings of Meher Baba, an Indian spiritual master, she became a member of the spiritual school he founded in America, Sufism Reoriented. Science and spirituality guided her long career at Los Medanos College, where she taught astronomy, physics, and a humanities course entitled The Origin and Evolution of the Universe, Perspectives from Science and Religion. Her life work in this field culminated in writing a reference volume on the subject, Religion and the Physical Sciences. The book traced the 20th century scientific breakthroughs about the origin, evolution, and future of the cosmos, exploring at each step their relation to religious beliefs as viewed by both scientists and religious scholars and teachers. And now let's hear from Dr. Kate Boisvert. Welcome, Kate. She's muted.
And Susie and anyone who was responsible for inviting me to talk with you today, because this subject is very dear to my heart and I have not had an opportunity to revisit it in quite a long time. So it's a great delight to be with you. So I'm going to start by tracing my own life history with science and religion. As a child, I was very religious and I was quite fascinated with creation. I would run to the woods nearby my house and find a stream, and I would just be dying to know where it came from. And then as a teenager, I had the great privilege of singing Haydn's Creation Oratorio with my glee club in a great cathedral. And I was just totally transported. You know, the music was so beautiful, and I just felt I was experiencing the very joy of creation. But I sure wasn't interested in science, and in college I dreaded, pardon me, taking my lab science. But a poet friend suggested I take astronomy. Well, I did, and I fell in love with the stars and the universe. I knew I was in love because I hate to be cold, and yet I would kneel down on the icy ground in outdoor labs at night in the coldest winter in January in New England, and I would draw the constellations. And then when I would try to get up, I was stuck to the ground. So I hadn't even noticed that I was cold. So unfortunately, it was too late for me to major in astronomy. But I did see a place I would really like to work, which is the Institute for Space Studies. And so I finished college and went to New York and I got another job. And one beautiful spring day, I was taking a walk in Central Park, passing a beautiful flowering pink fruit tree, and two gentlemen came jogging along, and one of them picked a flower and gave it to me. And guess who he was? He was the director of the Institute for Space Studies. And I got to know him and went to work. He hired me to help him write one of the first books on cosmic evolution. It was a very exciting venture for me, and it really aroused in me again a passion to know how the universe worked. Well, I went to UC Berkeley after that to study astronomy, and I had to do all these physics courses. They were very hard and kind of boring because actually my interests lay deeper. I would say to myself, okay, this is how gravity works, but I really want to know why it exists. What does it mean? A yearning welled up in me, and I remember internally sending out a plea, praying to know how the whole universe works, including people and everything. I read a phrase in Uspensky, remember yourself. This really stirred me. It made me think I was really much, much more than who I thought I was, and part of a much greater being. So not long after that, I began to receive answers to my questions. Now, the second thing I loved most after the stars was mountains, and I became an avid backpacker. I was drawn to explore a region of the High Sierra called Evolution Basin. And I planned a very ambitious a backpacking trip with a group of friends. But just over the crest of the Sierra, I stubbed my toe and I couldn't go on. So I stayed behind and enjoyed life on a high mountain meadow at 12,000 feet. Then one night, under the brilliant stars of the Milky Way, surrounded by several 14,000-foot peaks, I had an experience of divinity so complete that it absorbed me for days. It was the high point of my life. I was drawn to the teachings of the spiritual master, Meher Baba, where I found some interesting statements relating to science. The law of gravitation, he writes, which all the planets and stars are subject to, is in its own way a dim reflection of the love that pervades the universe. The forces of cohesion and affinity which prevail in the very constitution of matter are positive expressions of love. So my point in telling you all of this is to show how my own spiritual search was actually through science. My passion for the universe was an integral part of my spiritual journey. And I still daily find inspiration in contemplating the workings of the universe and how they reflect spiritual truths. So for me, they go hand in hand. This idea was well expressed in another of Meher Baba's discourses, titled The Rightful Place of Science. It is a mistake to look upon science as anti-spiritual. It is a help or hindrance to spirituality according to how it is used. When properly used, just as true art expresses spirituality, science can be a fulfillment of the spirit. Scientific truths concerning the physical body and its life in the physical world can become mediums for the soul to know itself. But to serve this purpose, they must be fitted into a larger understanding. So, you know where I'm coming from. I see the possibility of fully integrating science and religion. But I'd like to review for you how this subject is approached by a very wide group of scientists and theologians. And I'd like to focus on sort of three basic ways in which they relate. They're either enemies or strangers in irreconcilable conflict, or simply independent and have nothing to do with each other. Or they're friends who can engage in a rich, creative dialogue that will help both realms. Or they're marriage partners and can be fully integrated into one worldview. So let's examine these positions through the lens of the new creation epic that emerged from science, the Big Bang Theory and cosmic evolution. I'll first review a little bit the current picture of the universe. Will, the first slide, please. I guess they're not slides anymore. So we inhabit a world which, together with 8 other planets and numerous minor planets, and I can use my cursor, circles an average medium-sized star that generates light by fusing hydrogen into helium in its super hot core. Our solar system is about 3/5 of the way from the center out to the edge of a flattened, large spiral galaxy called the Milky Way. It's a vast disk containing hundreds of billions of stars, stretching 100,000 light years across space, each light year being 6 trillion miles. The visible content of these galaxies is only 5% of their mass, the remainder being dark matter, whose exact nature is still unknown. Next slide, please. Other galaxies, such as this beautiful great galaxy in Andromeda, which I know many people love, exist. They exist in family groups called clusters and superclusters. Next picture. We see them out to the edge. Every single image in this is a galaxy. We see them out to the edge of the visible universe, some 13 to 14 billion light years away. Current theories suggest our universe may be just one among many possible universes in a grand multiverse. The Big Bang Theory asserts that our universe emerged from an infinitesimal point, unimaginably dense and hot. We can have the next slide, please. This is a depiction of cosmic evolution. Here's the point where it emerged. There's an unstable fluctuation in a background vacuum. It suddenly expanded and began to cool, undergoing rapid transformations in the first second as forces individuated and different particles formed. In this first split second, all of the factors that make the universe conducive to life were set. The particle masses, the strength of each force, etc. They were set at the precise values that are needed for atoms to exist and long-lived stars to manufacture the elements of life and for life itself to exist. The universe continued to grow and cool, and by the end of the first second, we had particles that sound familiar, the proton, electron, and neutron. And also there were the forms, the particles that form dark matter, whose nature is not yet understood. So during the first few minutes, temperatures cooled down to the temperatures that exist today. In the center of stars, thermonuclear fusion of hydrogen to helium occurred. During the next 400,000 years, the top slide, began the era of atoms, and following that, galaxies and stars. Stars evolved, burned hydrogen and later helium, and formed heavier and heavier elements, and returned those elements to space through small or giant explosions. Some 4 to 5 billion years ago, one interstellar cloud shrank under gravity and collapsed to a disk, eventually forming a star encircled by planets. One small rocky world orbiting nearby had all the right conditions for life. The very simplest microscopic life emerged first, perhaps by chance, interactions that produced more and more complex molecules, and finally one that could reproduce itself. By chance mutation, some offspring possessed new characteristics that made them better able to survive their environments. This natural selection and survival of the fittest had begun. 1 billion years ago, large life forms developed, like the reptiles and dinosaurs. They dominated until their sudden extinction, which opened a niche for small furry animals to develop. 2 million years ago marks the appearance of the first humans. Okay, we can turn the slide off. So how does this scientific picture actually relate to religion? Scientific materialists and creationists think they're enemies, at least strict creationists. Scientists who, one group of scientists, and it's by no means the largest majority, I don't think, believe that only physical matter and energy are real, and science is the only way to understand them. The entire material world will eventually be explained by science. If science doesn't find something, it doesn't exist. Carl Sagan says, the cosmos is all that ever is or ever was or ever shall be. Others say the more the universe seems incomprehensible, the more it seems pointless. So if science can't find a purpose, there isn't one. Others talk of the ultimate triumph of reductionism, and the famous Stephen Hawking believes science will eventually even uncover the purpose. One of the most anti-religious of these people was Fred Hoyle, who strongly criticized Christian belief as nonsensical promise of eternal life. For him, religion was a desperate attempt to find an escape from the truly dreadful situation in which we find ourselves. But he actually rejected the Big Bang Theory because it was too religious. Ironically, it was he who gave it its name, deriding it on a radio show as this stupid Big Bang stuff. On the religious side, creationists most strongly oppose science. They all share the same belief that God brought each kind of living being into existence by a special creation, a special act of his divine creativity. Strict or young earth creationists believe the Genesis 1 account is literal and creation happened 10 to 1,000 years ago. Science is the absence of a divine creator, the immense time scales involved, the suggestion of a random chance-driven evolutionary process fly in the face of this account. Some of them, scientific creationists, sought scientific evidence that supports the Bible's creation story. Morris and Faulkner find 60 pieces of evidence, like the juxtaposition of dinosaur and human footprints on a riverbed. But many say that the real reason that they're against it is because it contradicts the most fundamental doctrine in Christianity. An old earth in which animals suffer pain and suffering, long before man even arrives, flies in the face of the theological belief that death and suffering are punishments for Adam's disobedience. If they occurred before man was here, it invalidates Christ dying on the cross to save us from sin. Both of these sides claim that the other doesn't do science right. They select data to support their own beliefs. They refuse to let evidence take them where it will in an open way. And they propose theories that you can't test. So as we move along the spectrum of creationists, we find old day age creationists such as William Jennings Bryan, who thought a day in Genesis could be millions of years. Progressive creationists, which include most of the people who call themselves creationists, seek to merge aspects of evolutionary theory with the Bible. Baptist theologian Bernard Ram posited that God actually just pictured all the creatures on that first day, in that first week, but actually created them later by his own direct action, progressively creating new root species that radiated out into today's full spectrum of species. Finally, intelligent design proponents oppose macroevolution and life originating on its own without an intelligent designer, but they don't define the intelligent agent. And now we move to the next position. Science and religion are strangers. They are totally independent of each other. They address different questions by different methods of inquiry. Religion, on the other hand, answers the why questions of meaning and purpose with timeless truths that don't change. Scientific theories change, but must always be verified by data. One knows a religious truth through intuition. Notable among the people who hold this independence view is the scientist, the Jesuit scholar, Georges Lemaitre, who actually proposed the Big Bang Theory in its early form, the primeval atom. He spoke forcefully and sometimes humorously against interpreting the Bible to support science. He said, believing the Bible pretends to teach science is like assuming there must be authentic religious dogma in the binomial theorem. For him, the separateness had a meaning. It was in fact a gift from the hidden God, who does not reveal himself through science for a purpose, so that subsequent generations are not deprived of the pleasure of searching for him and for the solution. The universe is like Eden, the garden which had been placed at the disposal of man, so he would cultivate and explore it. Many scientists agree science cannot and should not even try to deliver metaphysical truths. Some think that people who do so are transgressing the bounds of science through wishful thinking, wanting their own theory to be true. And these incursions into theology are embarrassingly naive or dogmatic. Stephen Hawking concedes in his later writings that some crucial questions are outside of science. What caused the universe's coming into being? What is it that breathed fire into the equations to make a universe? Why does the universe go to all the bother of existing? Seeking the answers to this question, he wrote, is the quest for all human beings together, not just scientists. So looking at how theologians and religious figures view this independence idea, they take very seriously the findings of science, but give central importance to the scripture, the message of Christ's atonement, personal transformation through Christ. So now let's look at how they can be friends. In this relationship, science and religion, like friends, influence and stimulate each other's thinking, explore their similarities, grapple with their differences, and respect and appreciate each other. They challenge each other to grow. They bond in exploring common ground and a possible convergence of their worldviews. There are some wonderful examples of how personal religious or philosophical beliefs of scientists influence the content of their theories and also the practice of their science. Einstein, because he had a personal belief in an unmutable and unchanging universe, and when his own equations actually showed that the universe might be expanding, he rejected the idea. And he stuck in this term in his equation to make it go away. Well, later, the observations poured in revealing the expansion. And he said that was the greatest blunder of my career. Now, the final note on this is very ironic. That term that he stuck in has come into play again in science because we've discovered the universe is accelerating, and that term in his equation would actually produce that acceleration. So he was right after all. His belief in an orderly, predictable universe led him to reject quantum theory with all of its chance and uncertainty. And his famous remark there was, God does not play dice with the universe. Fred Hoyle's dislike of religion, as we noted, led him to reject the Big Bang. In other cases, religious beliefs inspired their theories. Einstein's deep belief in oneness motivated his lifelong quest for a unified theory of gravity and electromagnetism, and lay at the heart of many earlier theories, relativity, the quantum equivalence of light and energy. General relativity showed how mass energy is linked to the curvature of space-time. Always, he was finding unity in things that appeared dissimilar, as in any great creative process. He felt that all the finer speculations in science sprang from a deep religious feeling, and without that feeling, they would not be fruitful. He defined his own religious belief as the most beautiful, as his experience of the mysterious, that glimpse of the most profound reason or the most radiant beauty, the sense that something exists that we can't penetrate. In this sense, he's a deeply religious man. He later called this the cosmic religious feeling. Now, on the other hand, personal belief and spiritual elements affect how people actually do science. He thought that because of their great devotion to the rationality of the universe, Kepler and Newton were allowed to persevere through years and years of very hard work to achieve the laws of planetary motion. He himself, Einstein, stayed in solitary confinement listening to his beloved music for 2 weeks while he was creating the theory of general relativity. Religious or extra-physical experiences often inspired the practice of science and the theories. Nobel Prize winner Charles Townes had a revelatory experience when discovering the laser. The German chemist Pückler famously discovered the benzene ring while dreaming one night of a snake biting its tail. Physicist Joel Primack and biologist Pauline Rudd, for them, the religious qualities of hard work, sacrifice, faith, devotion, and contemplative union with the subject of inquiry are all needed in practicing science. Those are all also elements of the spiritual path. So, personal belief influences science, and science influences personal belief. The immensity and beauty of the cosmos and the grand sweep of cosmic evolution have aroused deep feelings of awe, but also humility at the apparent insignificance of the place of Earth and humanity in the cosmic scheme. Well, I count myself as someone who has been so inspired by the universe in this way. And I'd like now to read you a poem that I wrote about a dying star. Could I have the next slide, Will? So I'm really very moved thinking about the work stars do in the universe. I mean, they start with this really simple thing. They get super hot inside and they forge all the elements. And then in these vast explosions, distribute them back to space, all the heavy elements needed for the universe to go on and produce life. This is one of the most beautiful examples of an exploding star, a supernova, called the Crab Nebula. And this is the poem that I wrote to it. flower of heaven, ode to a dying star. What glories of radiance past reveal your billowing petals? Soft, shimmering light belies the catastrophic moment that brought you to your present state, that rent your very being to the core, shattering your inner life and turning you inside out for all to see. Sheath after burning sheath, your inner core released, revealing to all your labor of a billion years, forging the seeds of worlds to come, worlds of richer life and higher knowing, who will gaze upon your disappearing veils, O glorious flower of death, with gratitude. Okay, we can stop the slide now. So, scores of popular books by scientists and science writers all express awe at the sweeping vision of the entirety of creation from the beginning that's in the Big Bang, in the cosmic evolution. Science has found that the universe has a reeling and ecstatic grandeur, writes Carl Sagan. So another way that the finding of science influences religion is that it seems to call for or even confirm a divine creator. So we have to realize that the Big Bang theory is actually not a theory of the very beginning. Scientists can only crank the evolution back to hotter and hotter moments, and then the laws of physics break down before they get to time zero. So we've got to explain time zero. That had to come from God, from outside of science or our ability to know. In 1951, Pope Pius XII gave voice to this idea, praising the theory and saying that science has borne witness to the august instant when, along with matter, there burst forth from nothing a sea of light, and the elements split and churned and formed into millions of galaxies. Science has confirmed there is a creator. Interestingly, Lemaitre, who didn't like this kind of thinking, the one who'd come up with the theory, convinced the Pope not to talk like that, and he never did again. The hotly disputed anthropic principle in science has also spawned a lot of metaphysical questions. It invokes the question of a designer to explain why the universe is so perfectly tuned at just the right levels, things that had to happen back in the first second. Most scientists think this smacks of religion and hate it, but some think they need to be addressed. They call for a wider cosmology in which science expands not only the way it inquires, doesn't always require rigorous evidence, and expand the kind of theories it will accept to include all of humanity with its meaning and purpose. Cosmologist George Ellis believes this. But science also challenges religion. How can you actually reconcile two seemingly very different positions? A self-sufficient evolutionary process driven by the blind, apparently purposeless operations of chance and natural selection, with belief in the special dignity of the human being and the action of a loving, persuasive, purposive God who designed and still guides the whole process to some consummate end. Moderate and liberal Christians, who are mostly theistic evolutionists, embrace both cosmic evolution and this belief. At the end of the last century, 35 to 40% of our population agreed with the statement, human beings have developed over millions of years from advanced forms of life, but God guided the process. Theistic evolutionists squarely tackle the difficult and enormous questions that this raises. How does this God actually guide the process without disrupting natural laws? How can the chancy, purposeless appearance be understood? What kind of God is consistent with both of these positions? Can we detect God by this fine-tuning of the physical world and life's progression towards more complexity and consciousness? If it is all God's purpose for creation, how can we accept a process full of pain, struggle, and evil? And what is the significance of the incarnation and death of Christ on the cross in relation to the evolutionary process? These questions have spawned a very rich dialogue that has expanded and blossomed in the last 60 years. They've addressed all this literature in a vast all of these questions in a vast literature and a worldwide network of interested scientists, religious figures, theologians, and more who write books, convene world parliaments, conferences, and seminars, and establish permanent research centers. Pope John Paul II held a series of symposia, each one addressing just one of those questions. The Dalai Lama held mind and life conversations at an institute of the same name. New hybrid scholars have emerged, scientist theologians with deep training in both spheres, who seek to establish the science-religion dialogue as a new academic discipline. The Center for Theology and Natural Science at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley is an example. They teach courses and award degrees. Preeminent among this new hybrid breed is Ian Barber, who thoroughly explored the subject. He established the most widely used typology of ways they relate, the one that I'm using in this talk. He found many parallels between not only scientific and religious conceptions of truth, but even interestingly in their methods of knowing. He found that both of them proceeded by first having some kind of experience. Science looks at data and measures things. A person lives and has experience, maybe experiences the beauty of nature. And then from that, they develop theories or beliefs. A person who's religious might then, from his experiences, come to believe in God. The scientist, from his data, creates a theory. And that idea they carry forward as part of their truth. But then they test that theory by later experience in life. So this cyclical process, which probably underlies almost every process of knowing beyond science and religion, he actually converged them so that the science-religion field could have its own strict method of knowing, kind of separate from either one. People saw that as quite an achievement. So how actually do theistic evolutionists interpret religious truth in the light of science? Excuse me. Well, many, many ways. Some view God as only transcendent and above it all, but working on two levels, primary causes and the secondary causes which he created, which are the laws of nature, which then work on their own. The theologian Karl Rahner believes that evolution is actually driven by the indwelling of God's power of transcendence, which creates in them an urge to develop into something new. Others see God as both transcendent and immanent or dwelling in nature, imbuing nature itself with its own creativity and power to go beyond itself. Arthur Peacock believes this new dynamic, evolving cosmos necessitates a change in our concept of God. He indwells in nature to create through the inherent creativity of the very stuff of the world, making things make themselves. He uses rich metaphors for new concepts of God. A mother who gives birth to the world and within her own body. A composer who's still improving and creating his symphony. a choreographer who allows individual decisions on the part of the dancers. Process thought, the metaphysical system of philosopher Alfred North Whitehead, posits that a series of events and processes of change are more real than material objects. Every event has three causes: past occasions, divine purposes, the divine lure, and the entity's own response. And it has both interior and exterior aspects. God is present in the interior one, always offering possibilities and inviting and encouraging all of creation in a persuasive way toward his goals. Others address how we can actually bring Christ into the evolutionary picture as the final culmination of evolution. In one of these theologies, God self-limits his own being to allow space for creation to manifest, evolve, and have freedom. This final self-limitation took its ultimate form in Christ's crucifixion and resurrection, and his resurrection initiated the redemption of evolution. Rahner thinks that a transcendent God bestowed on all things the power to transcend themselves, but only humans could receive and give God's gift consciously. In Jesus, this receiving and transcendence was total. He showed us God's eventual aim for all beings, to become like him. This has a striking consonance with what Meher Baba said around the same time. The avatar, or Christ, awakens humanity to a realization of its true spiritual nature. He leaves for posterity the stimulating power of his divinely human example, the nobility of a life supremely lived. He has demonstrated the possibility of a divine life for all humanity, of a heavenly life on earth. Teilhard de Chardin, in his Phenomena of Man, also proposed an evolutionary process culminating in a cosmic Christ. Consciousness is central. In one grand trajectory, spirit-infused matter achieves more complex outer form and greater consciousness. The human consciously joins this process and helps to spiritualize and transform it through love. A collective global human consciousness emerges and attains its highest state in the cosmic Christ, or omega point. Thus, divinity is the goal, an immanent driving force through the whole evolutionary process. Now, many of these viewpoints really verge on presenting whole integrated systems. So I'll now turn directly to the subject of how science and religion can be fully integrated. One of the most comprehensive, I can take the slide of Meher Baba now. One of the most comprehensive descriptions of the workings of the cosmos, of the universe and life, is the spiritual cosmology of Meher Baba, laid out in his major work, God Speaks. This work incorporates an evolutionary process almost identical to that of science into a much wider spiritual reality. But first, a word about Meher Baba. He was born in India in 1894. When he was 20, he became enlightened and realized himself as God, which he later explained is the goal of every soul in creation. He was one of the souls destined to remain on earth and aid others in their quest for the goal. In his 20s and 30s, he gathered disciples around him, established an ashram and many service projects at his home in central India. In the 1930s, he worked with advanced souls all over India, made his first trips to the West, gathering his Western disciples. He would do some of his major work there, establishing centers and the spiritual school Sufism reoriented. He said America is ripe for spiritual advancement and eventually will lead the world spiritually. In the late 1950s and 60s, he had many periods of seclusion to do his inner work. The culmination of his outer work was a great assembly he held in 1962 called the East-West Gathering, where he brought together followers from East and West to initiate the great process of joining these two great arcs. He passed away in 1969. So let's have his slide now on the chart. So his American woman disciple, Rado Gailey, painted this chart to depict his cosmology. Transcendent God exists in two states, in the beyond state, which is likened to deep sleep, and in the beyond state, where once surged a whim and sudden urge within God to know himself more fully and explore himself more fully. The drop soul of his ocean emanated from the creation point and began a long journey of experiencing itself as all the different forms of the natural world. He first gained experience of the proton and electron, and then the atom, then a particle of dust or stone. Even a stone, Meher Baba says, has rudimentary consciousness and carries that forward, all the things it experiences. What happens next is a pattern of development that repeats itself over and over, whereby consciousness grows through experiencing life in ever more complex forms in each of the kingdoms. After stone and metal, goes into vegetable forms, then worms, insects, and reptiles, then fish and birds and animals, mammals. In each form, the soul receives impressions called sanskaras that hold all these experiences, memories, in a coded form, much like a little movie inside you would record everything that you experienced. The reels of these little films are carried along from lifetime to lifetime. This process, after dying, this process occurred throughout a vast universe of billions and billions of galaxies, each containing millions of worlds. The whole process is driven by God's desire to fully know himself. Always there is the urge to know more. Evolution ends with incarnation in the human form, which is fully conscious, but only of the physical world. The soul now embarks on the third major phase of its grand journey, reincarnation in millions of human forms. Through all these incarnations, the soul experiences every kind of human life. After each life, there's a period of reviewing all the experience just gained, learning the lessons of that life, which are then distilled into the intuitive makeup of the soul in future incarnations. When enough experience is gained, the soul tires of the world. It's drawn to look inward. It is ripe for disentanglement from the physical world, and it begins its homeward journey, now embarking on the phase of involution, in which it begins to unfold higher and higher consciousness, always releasing more and more limited impressions of who it was. When almost all the impressions have vanished, the soul sees God face to face and yearns to become one with him. With the vanishing of the last trace of impression, the soul realizes himself as God, thus achieving the final goal of life. Of supreme importance in this process is the very first soul who ever achieved God realization and became the special being called the Avatar or Christ. When this soul first saw God, the intensity of its love and yearning drew the attention of God, who gave the soul God realization. As this first fully realized soul in human form, he established the existence of the new personal God who incarnates over and over again in human form. The divine drama was now concluded. Okay. I'm going to go on now. So what will be the future of the relation between science and religion? Much deep and careful thought has characterized science and religion's joint search for unity. This coming together appears to be part of a greater transformative process humanity is now undergoing. Although things look dire and chaotic at the moment, Baba says that the agonizing travail that we experience now is all part of a great spiritual rebirth of mankind into a new humanity and a new order of being. Two great arcs of learning have characterized the work of humanity over the past several hundred years. The East has explored and mastered the world of spirit, the world of religion. The West has explored and mastered the outer world of matter, the world of science, and greatly improved the lot of humanity. In the age to come, as my faith tradition views it, these arcs will merge into a new unity, and a new way of being and knowing will emerge. Something will happen that has never happened before. More and more people are becoming ready to experience divinity while living on earth, even while engaging in the mundane activities of life. This new state has been heralded as the new creation, or in Christianity, the kingdom of God on earth. How will science and religion relate then? They will work together as one, hand in hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. That's just so exciting to hear the way that you and the scientists have put together science and religion. We now will have questions from or comments from the attendees. Please raise your hand like Will suggested.
Linda has unmuted herself and I think has a question.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Is that Linda, me? Yikes. Okay. I apologize. I had to be away for the whole talk except to hear the beautiful words of the ending of the new creation and heaven on earth. Yeah. So I'm hoping this question wasn't addressed properly. And if it was, just tell me to go listen to the Zoom. However, I would love to know, as the human mind evolves to become one which is capable of streaming from other dimensions and bringing together many dimensions into one awareness of being, there will be, I would think, much more presence in the now. Can you comment on that and speak to that a little bit?
Well, I can't imagine that wouldn't be true. I think if one is living fully in the now, I mean, I can just speak for myself. If I didn't have all these silly worries and reactions and stuff, you know, if I could just kind of be a little freer from them, I could be totally there in a moment. So I think that humanity is going through this process right now of shedding everything that's wrong with it. I think that, I mean, your whole idea of what's going on now, Sarah, that you spoke to at the beginning, you know, hopefully this chaos is going to lead to righting the injustice. Mayor Baba said he wanted that, to just get away with, eradicate this inequality among different groups. And and not have some people rich and some people poor and so forth. I can't think of a good way to say that, but people born naturally out of love want to help anybody who needs it. So I think that, yes, absolutely. We'll all be more present in the now.
And as such, the brain may not be working in the way that we currently.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's very important. We're actually all moving from the age of reason into the age of intuition.
So,
And, you know, that way of knowing. But, you know, even that, the religious way of knowing and the scientific way will merge. And I don't know that our word intuition fully covers it, but I think it's going to be something wonderful.
yes, yes. And is there another question, Will, that has come up for another person?
I'm not seeing them right now.
Okay.
Robert
Yeah.
Ish.
Oh, good. Okay.
Hi, Kate and
Hi,
everybody.
Robert.
It seems like what you're talking about is the beginning of a spiritual renaissance where science and religion combine. And a lot of us work on our spiritual growth, our own personal spiritual growth. But do you have an idea of what we could personally do to foster this unification, this spiritual renaissance you're talking about?
Well, I always think it belongs, it has to come right down to the mind and heart of each individual. In one discourse, Mayor Baba said that the root cause of all of this chaos and war and everything is the individual selfishness of the personal ego. And that's what I think people need to do, you know, if they really fully believe it and live by it, others will feel it too. You know, you can always, I think change comes about not by some people telling others how to be, but because the individual transforms inside themselves, probably with lots of help.
You know, there's this
Does that
kind
address
of,
your question?
it does. There's this kind of tension in society that we really don't need to have between science and religion. There's so many other tensions, and to be able to move those fields together so that they become integrated and supportive is I think, would be a relief to all of us.
Well, it's always interesting to note that, you know, around 45 to 50% of Americans actually subscribe to the strict creationism. So it's, and of course, that doesn't mean that they're not, you know, that's just kind of the intellectual stuff. That doesn't mean that any one of them might deeply in their heart of hearts not be a selfish person and actually be working towards some great good, you know. It's just, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did I see Susie's hand? No? I'm looking for either hands like this or hands like this under the reactions button. Or you can unmute yourself to ask your question.
Or make a comment.
I'll ask.
Yeah, Edie McLeod.
Yeah.
Go ahead and unmute yourself, Edie.
I just wanted to thank Kate. It was a beautiful talk. I really enjoyed it. I don't have a question.
Thank you.
Thank
I do have a question.
Susie.
Kate, do you want to say something about the comet that's been passing over?
I haven't seen it yet. I've been so busy with this talk.
Well, the cloud cover's gotten in the way too.
They sometimes are said to herald great new things. I did read something about it, which I'm not quite remembering. So I apologize. You know what? I will say one more thing in response to the gentleman from Washington. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name. Was it? Anyway, Robert. Um, you know, this talk was all about kind of, in a sense, pretty intellectual, abstract things. And one way I certainly hope science and religion begin to relate more is in the actual world of action. And I keep thinking about how they could work together, and how um, partnerships of churches and scientists or something could solve certain problems together. I can't really think of an example, but that could be another topic for somebody to address. I mean, to look at Sarah, to look at the present situation as from the science and religion points of view. You know, what are the possible ways in which we're going to extricate ourselves from this mess? Yes, Robert.
Just to comment on that, in our church, one of the ways they've done that is we had a 6-week lecture on climate change, because you're looking at God's creation, and then we're using the science to see what we can do to take care of that. And it's something that people can get together
Perfect.
on.
Perfect, yeah. I mean, even in the realm of human interaction, science could help get data, you know, on different groups and their disparities, and you know, just really work with religion in forging solutions.
Nancy Burgess has a question.
Well, this is a little down the worldly side of this, but I called you, Kate, last night at 9:30. You were probably sleeping, getting ready for this talk, because I was walking and it was dark about 9:30, and I saw a fireball, which I realized by looking on the internet, this beautiful blue light passing in front of me in the sky. And I thought it was maybe the comet, and I thought, no, that couldn't be the comet. And then I thought somebody was setting off a firecracker, but the trajectory was wrong. There was no sound and no airplanes or rockets or anything, but it was this beautiful big aqua light that passed in the sky in front of me.
Did it move across the stars, or was it just fixed?
It moved, yeah. And we looked it up on the internet today, blue meteor. We looked it up under blue meteor, and we saw a whole bunch of YouTubes of things that looked exactly like it. But it definitely wasn't the comet, because people were talking about how they were taking pictures of the comet and they would do a 4-second exposure and all this stuff. And I thought, no, this was just like 1 second. And, you know, if you think of a size, you know, I mean, there were things on the internet that were like this big in your perception, and this one was like as big as a baseball.
Did any of the things on the internet say what they ended up being?
They just said it was a meteor, and it had to do with the contents of it, you know, like iron,
right?
A lot of iron in it or something. And that, you know, if it's plasma, it'll be red, and if it's different elements, it'll be a different color, blue or green or yellow.
Interesting.
But it was the biggest thing I've ever seen, and I was stunned. I was calling you, and I was calling the planetarium. It was like, anyway. It was just,
it's exciting to see.
It was cosmic, you know.
Yes, I understand.
I'm on page 2 looking for anyone that has questions. Channing.
Kate.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Channing.
Hi, Channing.
I'm on the Interfaith Council with Susie.
Yes.
And yeah, my question is, are you familiar with Fritjof Capra?
Yes, the Tao of Physics.
Correct. Now he's someone who came into the world knowing him in the 70s.
Right.
And I have followed him in much of his reaching out to people in religion over the years. And so I recently read an article that was talking about how things were going to come together. And I'm just wondering if if you know of him, if you, what is he doing now?
You know, that I don't know. I haven't kept up with this field very well. And I didn't bring him into this talk because I didn't address one whole other big area in which there's a tremendous science and religion dialogue, and that is in the ultimate constituents of matter. And that's where his work, really came into play. It's a fascinating subject, and I can just briefly talk about it, but that wasn't your question.
No, that's okay. I had a very open-ended question.
Okay.
I was just wondering what he's working on.
Well, as scientists, let me think about what we're. Well, as scientists have gone down further and further and further into matter, they kind of don't know where it ends. And some of the most beautiful theories that actually unite all four forces of nature that could sort of almost predict that T equals 0 involve thinking of the universe as being composed of these tiny little one-dimensional strings that vibrate. And they're as much smaller as from an atom as the atom is smaller than the solar system. I mean, the atom itself is unbelievably tiny, and these things are just, it's
smaller than quarks.
Oh, way smaller than quarks. Oh yeah. I mean, 10 to the minus 20,
Wow.
But the idea of everything being composed of these little strands has very interesting echoes in Meher Baba, where everything is composed of these samskaric impressions, which are like little strings. And let me see. There's, of course, the whole thing about quantum mechanics, breaking the back of science's belief in causality and saying that things can just happen by chance. And that's given rise to a whole theology. Sarah was referring to that. Sometimes people invoke God as the one who comes in and actually figures out where the particle goes. It isn't really chancy,
But sometimes that's just an excuse, the God of the gaps, right? That we just
Yes,
used God
that's
to
right.
bridge whatever gap that we don't
That's
know
right.
how to explain yet.
Right, and that's very dangerous because science will come along and fill that gap in. And the other thing, though, that's really, people don't realize how uncertain the whole scientific picture might really be. Scientists can't, it's based on extra scientific assumptions that are really philosophical and that science can't prove. For example, the whole thing works by these laws. Where did those laws came from? What as Hawking said, what breathed fire in them to make a universe? We can't really assume and the theories depend crucially on everything having been constant over 13 billion years. The speed of light, the force of gravity, the strength of it, the rate of decay of the uranium atom that determines the whole time scale. I mean, if any one of those things are wrong, a lot of this could be all out the window. So, I mean, that's both exciting and scary, I guess, for many scientists. And they don't like to go there, although a few do.
It can either be that the universe is finely tuned in order to bring us to existence with that anthropic principle, or we are the way that we are because of the way that the universe expanded. I wanted to share this image again. I'd love you to talk more about this image, if you wouldn't mind, Kate, and maybe even a little bit more about how evolution and reincarnation. Was there any sense that Meher Baba had that maybe this goes on cyclic outside of in addition to the Big Bang that we have? I mean, as some cosmologists are talking about, is it possible that there was a big bounce and that there was a collapse of the material world into that singularity that then bounced back into this Big Bang?
Yes, and
And
that,
especially with reincarnation being a part of your theology.
yeah, that's like the reincarnating universe. Actually, both of those things happen both in Baba's cosmology and in science. Einstein's theories, equations of general relativity predicted either a universe that sort of expands forever at a fairly steady rate, just kind of gradually slowing but never stopping. One that kind of accelerates and expands wildly out of existence, and the other one that closes back on itself, perhaps to then bounce back up. And there's an entire, and that has accord with a lot of ideas in Eastern religion. I didn't get into all that. I really stuck pretty much with Christianity in this talk, and that was itself almost too much. But
Are multiple universes possible in that cosmology of the big bounces and the
yes,
conflations and
yes,
then the big
yeah,
bounce
yes,
again?
exactly. So, the theories of quantum cosmology say that in some realm or dimension, there's this constant fluctuation of these bubbles, and they're popping up, trying to be universes all the time. And only a few will sort of manage to achieve just the right expansion rate to keep going and be steady and exist for a long time. So that's fully compatible. Um, I see. I need to address your question more directly. Could you just repeat it for me?
I was just wondering if multiple universes is consistent with the big bounce theory.
Oh, well, I don't see why not. I mean, I guess you could say that one bubble sort of, and then it comes back on itself, and then it does the same thing, the same bubble. You know, that's the only way I can think. I haven't heard how those might merge. The concept exists also in Meher Baba's cosmology, and he calls it Mahapralaya. There are moments in this process, and this is really from Hinduism too, where the creator God kind of breathes it all back in and then
Mm-hmm.
breathes it all back out. And that can happen for various reasons. I mean, it's quite possible that, and Baba himself said there were many, he believed there were many universes, and he and another person of his similar consciousness saw them all coming out of themselves. And so that's in accord too. So, you know, that seems to be a pretty accepted theory, although quite untestable. Did that address your question?
Yes, very much so. I'm looking for more hands on page 2. Jacqueline has her hand raised. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. Very appreciative of your sharing your passion for what you're speaking about, not just the information, but you're speaking from your heart. And that is very interesting to me and wonderful. I'm curious about how you, as a Westerner, reconcile science's a lens of inheritance, like DNA, you know, scientifically from generation to generation, and reincarnation. It seems that they conflict. You know, either if you believe in reincarnation, then if we talk about past generations and how we've inherited certain qualities from our father, our mother, it seems to conflict with the idea of reincarnation, which
well, I think each process is just worked out on each level. I mean, the DNA thing, that's another example of strings. I knew there was one more. You know, these strands that code everything that we are. That's on the physical plane that determines our body. I think as the soul comes in and it has this set of impressions that it's going to express, it's somehow worked out in a way that I couldn't possibly, of course, explain and maybe not even imagine. A parallel process is worked out in the DNA. And so you are born into a situation where the physical body you will inhabit and its DNA is a reflection, will produce the kind of experiences that you're destined to have that lifetime. I don't know if I said that really well, but I'm just saying, I think they both go on together. There's different levels in which, I mean, there's higher laws that work in the realms of the subtle and mental spheres, and they don't ever contradict the natural laws that work down here, you know, the being born of certain parents and getting certain characteristics. But I think somehow the soul just finds the right parents, grandparents, etc., to match what it needs from the higher levels.
See, thank you.
That's just the way I explain it. I have no idea if that's true.
Okay, thank you. Are you familiar with Maharshi's teachings in MIU, transcendental meditation? Has that ever come across your radar?
I'm afraid I'm not. I mean, that the whole phenomenon came across my radar as a student at Berkeley in the 60s, but I'm afraid I don't. But
I practice transcendental meditation, and I'm fascinated that there is actually a university based on transcendental meditation, and so I'm wondering if in our lifetime will we see other places of learning where going within will be a very important part of the curriculum. You know, meditation is going within, and yet it's a university where people study business. It's a very practical place of learning, but it's very different from all other universities that I know of. Maybe that's a trend, and I realize you're not familiar with it at this point. I'm studying consciousness. There's actually an online class that I'm studying. So does this give you a sense that the future is bright? I mean, are you an optimist? Do you feel that all this chaos is simply groundwork for its preparation for this new vantage point from which we will live?
Yes, I do. I mean, the fact that it looks so awful now, I like to think of a kind of a simple little everyday analogy. You know, when you clean out under your sink and you start into the process, it all gets much worse as you see all the grime and stuff, you know, and you're just overwhelmed by it. It's just, and your mind goes crazy. I don't think I can do this, and blah, blah, blah. And what happens is that all the dirt and filth and everything that needs to get out of there and does get out of there. Well, I think that's what's happening right now in the political scene in our country. You know, all of these viewpoints that have been held inside and have been kind of hidden are getting brought to the fore so they can be expressed and eventually gotten away with. That's one thing. So anyway, but I absolutely believe that there will be whole universities devoted to spiritual subjects. There's one in San Francisco, is at the Institute for the Study of Consciousness. There's a few of them. I think way more than are on the tip of my tongue right now. I think that much of what I described is all pretty intellectual, and it's based on mental understanding, whereas what you're talking about is actually the development of consciousness. And is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. No, but I mean, if we're going into an age where people are going to all be more spiritual, I don't see how what you're saying couldn't be true.
So you notice in your conversations with people that there are more and more people who are studying meditation. That's what I seem to observe.
Oh, yes, it's penetrated psychology. I mean, a lot of the psychologists I know are using some kind of meditation. You know, there's mindfulness, and I just think that, I mean, that's a whole other way in which, at a more experiential level as opposed to mental level, that science and religion are coming together. Yeah. That's what you're talking about.
Yes. That's another part of it. And one more question. When you do have, you know, you're just sitting, you're meditating on life, do you ever just imagine being up in space because you love the stars so much, the galaxies. Do you see yourself sometimes there and looking at planet Earth and just,
yes.
so what thoughts come to your mind when you do that?
Wow. Well, I'll tell you one thing that I think I see about myself. I think kind of as a soul, this lifetime, I really needed big spaces. You know, I went to school that was associated with a big cathedral. I was unhappiest when I was not around something like that. Then I studied the universe, and I finally, my mind had a place to inhabit that was like big enough, you know. And now this, you know, the spiritual path I follow allows for greater, I'm not saying I have them, but a greater vision of things.
Do you think it influenced your direction just maybe as a child? You imagined being up in space, seeing the planet? Because for me, I do that. And when I think of that image of the world, the ball of the world being a ball in space, I think it's one organism.
Oh,
it
yes.
makes it very simple for me. Yes.
Right.
And then I say, wow, we are one. All these years, you know, I've heard we are one. What does that mean? But to me, it's very real. We are, relative to space, we are one. So
I think so, exactly. I think the astronauts had those feelings. And I mean, I think that's what, I think I do. So, I mean, I don't consciously think of myself floating around in space, but I do picture it all. And I have a very pictorial kind of mind. So I know what you mean. I mean, it's a very beautiful sight to see the Earth like that.
So
you know, that's another whole dimension of these cosmologies, and that is that what is the real place of the Earth in the universe? You know, that's the Copernican principle. The Earth was relegated to a more and more and more and more and more insignificant place. And so humanity was relegated down to something that came from apes. You know, it just destroyed the dignity of both humanity and the Earth. But both from science and these bridging thoughts, and from the cosmology of Meher Baba, that's reversed. Meher Baba says that there are several planets where there are human beings, and one they're all head, and then some have mostly head, and then we, as in mind. Only on Earth can humans balance the heart and head and achieve God realization. And we are closest to that Om point from which he emerged. I mean, that's special, you know. And intelligent design and the anthropic principle are all also kind of make the Earth more special in that it has such finely tuned properties to support life.
So are you saying that the universe is a consciousness machine? Whatever form brings about consciousness, whether it's human or dolphin or elephant, we know that they have culture. We know that they have even communication in whales.
That's amazing.
Yes.
She said.
I do think it's the mechanism for achieving it. You see, all of this stuff is God imagining himself as all these forms, but he's really not any of those forms. They're just illusion. So he's got to get rid of those ideas. You know, all those sanskaras have to, and impressions of who he is have to disappear. I mean, it's like a scaffolding that makes a body, and was important in order for the consciousness to develop. But once it's developed, you get rid of the scaffolding. You don't need all those forms anymore.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kate, for answering.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure to be with you.
We're a little bit over our declared time. I just want to double check with folks, since we started 5 minutes late, if we are close to ending, or if there's last questions that we want to ask Kate. Isn't it great to be able to pick the mind of your favorite local astronomer?
Definitely.
Yeah. I see lots of clapping.
Aw.
Yes.
Well, you're a delightful group to be with, and I'm really, really grateful for the opportunity to just talk with people about this stuff again. Thank you.
Sarah, do you want to lead us out?
Yes, I would certainly like to express my appreciation, Kate. You presented what for me is a very encouraging view to get rid of that false dichotomy between science and religion, that the future is science and religion working together. And I didn't find your sharing extremely intellectual. I think that there was a lot of heart in it, and a lot of passion, like I think somebody mentioned. I remember somebody said, scientists may not believe in God, but God believes in them. I just think that one thing that we in the Interfaith Council really look for in the big questions is the golden threads that go through all of the higher truths of the religions. And there are many, and the more golden threads we find that weave through the religions, the more integrated we feel like we can become. And those of us that are interested in the search for integration and for the wonder of the reality, the true reality of the world, we experience that joy within ourselves because we see how we can indeed become one. We're body, mind, and spirit. We can become one in spirit. So I just thank you so much, and it's just been absolutely I don't know, just inspiring.
Oh, thank you. Can I just share? I want to speak to one point you just made. I think, I don't remember if it was Mayor Baba or one of my teachers at Sufism, said that scientists are simply God trying to figure himself out.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you, Will, Susie,
Thank you, Will.
everybody.
And thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
See you in another month.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let's
Have a great week, folks. Be well.
Bye.
You too.
We'll look forward to next month's presentation.
I'll send out a note.
Thank you.